Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Team Tuesday. This week, we have with us the tag team of Lorna Mason and Jon Lawrence. Hi, y'all. Welcome back.
Hello.
Hello.
So, Team Tuesday, of course, but before we jump into the team part of the Tuesday, we also want to talk about the book part of the Tuesday. So let's start with you, Lorna. What's the book that most influenced you in your career as a Scrum Master?
I didn't even know, this is so shameful, I didn't even know this was a book until about 3 or 4 years ago. And I had probably the biggest interview of my career. And I was planning to just rock up with some of those paper prompt cards for my presentation. I wasn't even going to do it in PowerPoint. This is how shamefully embarrassing it is. And a friend of mine who's an Agile coach pulled me aside and he said, "Have you ever seen the Simon Sinek talk Start With Why?" And I was like, what? I don't even know who Simon Sinek is. And I have to say, it was one of those life-changing moments. And I don't care how cheesy that sounds, because I now make every Scrum Master I know and I work with watch this podcast and watch this TED Talk, because it's amazing. And it's the book, Start With Why. And he basically talks about Apple and how they revolutionized everything by being different to all the other companies because they understood their why and what they were doing and basically what they're about. You know, the why, the how, and the what, and the golden circle. And, you know, when you're talking about products, you're talking about the reason you're doing something. And I think it just, when you look at other companies, they miss the mark completely because they don't understand their market. They don't understand why they're doing something. So they put things out to market and they miss the mark because they don't understand who they're doing it for and why they're doing it. And I watched that TED Talk and I got the job. I managed to put together a presentation and I was asking questions about the company and why they were doing what they were doing. But I think it changed me as a person because, you know, I was going into refinements and I was looking at stories and questioning product owners and saying, yeah, but why are we doing this? What's the return on this? What's the value in this? And I was getting answers like, well, this is part of my OKRs. I need to do this for me. But there was no actual business value in it. And it's something that I've continued doing, you know, into my delivery manager role. And I know Jon's doing it as a coach now, and we're questioning product and we're saying, well, you know, we've got a full backlog here. If you want to pull this in, then something else needs to go. You know, what's, you know, the GWP on this? Why are we doing it? You know, and even as a parent, you're kind of doing it. But I think it really makes you think about your customers more, you know, and you're thinking about what's making them tick and what's actually going to deliver them the most value. And I think, you know, I watch it every few months just to keep me true to what we're doing. And it's really, really important. And I think, you know, when you're looking at products and what you're putting out there, it's something that everyone should watch because it's just such a powerful concept, but it's so simple as well. You know, the what, the how, and the why, you know, how it all comes together as one.
Absolutely. And I definitely recommend the TED Talk for Scrum Masters out there to understand this in more detail. And watching it every few months is kind of pretty big recommendation. So thank you for that, Lorna.
No worries.
All right, Jon, now to you. What's the book that most influenced you?
So the book so I'm actually picking a book which I'm currently reading. So the reason being is it's something which is already kind of striking a note to me. And it's a book by Heidi Helfand around dynamic reteaming. And it's something which I think is really important because we see a lot of the time that we have long-standing teams. A lot of the time you're taught that as a Scrum Master, a team which has worked together for a long time is a team which is going to be really successful. But actually, there's a point where you can go to the other side and actually you find that the team may not be as innovative or they may have got very used to each other. And actually having the opportunity to re-team and to reform the team, to mix up how we work as a group is really important to me. And it's something which I've found in past experiences. So it's a book which I'm reading at the moment, understanding further around kind of the different concepts. It falls back to obviously team formation. At the start of the team is really important, but also during the cycle of a team as well, making sure that we don't rest on kind of a team structure, that we keep on improving and we keep on looking for ways to improve. It kind of falls back to, in essence, inspecting and adapting the team structure, team formation, and applying that principle to the way that we as Scrum Masters view our teams. And actually, it's quite healthy to on occasion to change the teams, change the pattern, get people working with different people who haven't previously worked together and share ideas. There's new innovations which you put two people together, they might come up with something different than two other people.
Absolutely. Actually, one of the things that you said is incredibly important is that the moment you change the team, you change the environment. So you can have I don't mean that Scrum Master should change the team. I mean that we should consider that as part of our toolbox, of course, and work with management and the team itself to figure out what's the best next step. But definitely when the team changes, as you said, the dynamics change, the ability to be creative changes. There's that norming and storming phase. The storming phase can be very creative for teams, so definitely. And because we're talking about teams, we'll dive straight into that. And I know Jon wants to tell a story about a team that self-destructed. Maybe there's some reteaming lessons there as well. So go ahead, Jon.
Thank you. So it falls back to kind of the reason why I'm reading this book. I'm so passionate is it strikes a chord with stories. So in a previous team I was working with, I was kind of brought in on the understanding that they're agile mature, they know full processes, and they're really running at speed. They just need someone to kind of help them just maybe inspect and adapt a little bit, keep on improving. And I came in and brilliant team, lovely people to work with, but it was quite apparent that they weren't as agile mature as we saw or what was said. So going back to the point which Lorna made yesterday, I took the time to understand the team, understand what was going on within the team, and I spotted some trends. Particularly, I spotted something which I've called legacy debt. And the way that I call this, the reason why I call this is the team had previously worked in a waterfall environment, and they previously worked waterfall. They'd gone through an agile transformation, and they'd worked together in waterfall. They'd worked together as an agile team for the last 2 years. And what I noticed was the team were actually slipping into what I call legacy debt, because they were actually going, well, how did we used to do this? Oh, we used to do this. Let's go and do this again because that will just get it resolved. And they were falling back into waterfall principles because they knew the person sat next to them. They'd worked together as a team in waterfall, and they were very comfortable in those kind of environments of overcoming a problem.
What would be an example of that, Jon, of going back to that legacy debt, as you called it?
So one of really good questions. So one of them would be they felt that they could work on something at the end of the sprint, and it's fine to do the test in that sprint, and we're fine to split it. It's okay if dev's done one sprint, testing's done another, and we look to sign it off with the business the following sprint. And they didn't quite see that the timeline by doing that is stretched out over 6 weeks potentially, and your delivery could be over 6 weeks. Whereas actually, if we all came together as a team to work through that in one sprint, we could get it completed in a 2-week sprints, and we'd be able to ship it faster to the customer and support obviously realizing the value and the benefits as early as possible.
So familiarity is one of the reasons why teams sometimes go back to that legacy debt, as you called it. Question to both of you, like what have you seen as triggers for teams to go back to that legacy debt? And sometimes it's not waterfall in the background, right? Like it's cowboy-driven development or chaotic development or bug-driven development, whatever that might be. So what do you guys, in your experience, what triggers teams to go back to that legacy debt?
I've not heard the term cowboy-driven development before.
I really
mortgage-driven development, not cowboy.
I was just going to mention, I think actually you've really summed up very well there when you said familiarity. And familiarity can be what drives this. And one of the ways that we overcame this was by mixing up the teams. So the teams no longer were familiar with each other. They were working with different people who they hadn't worked together with in a waterfall or a legacy environment. So they had to form new ways of working because they were newly working together. So they were creating a new bonds. And as a result, they're creating new ways of working with that colleague. And the adoption of Agile really kind of ramped up at that stage. Lorna, for yourself.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's mixing the teams up. It's kind of pushing their comfort zones a little bit more. It's very easy to slip back into the familiar when that's what you're around and that's what you know. So it's a case of mixing it up. Sometimes it's even swapping out a Scrum Master. Because it can be the influence of a Scrum Master if they've got a very strong project management background in waterfall, and it's even subconscious that you slip back into that kind of allowing those bigger releases, we're stacking things up, building up that legacy debt or tech debt or whatever else, and letting those things happen. Even splitting those stories out to allow the testing into the next sprint and things like that.
So it just occurred to me, like we had Heidi Helfand on the show, I think 2 years back. I'll put the link on the show notes for people to check it out. She was talking about the book precisely. And it just occurred to me that reteaming might be a very practical way to put in practice one of the things we talk a lot about in the Agile community, which is to unlearn the previous ways of working, right? Like, because what we are doing in practice is to inject a little bit of chaos into the system by, having different team setups, and people will naturally need to find the equilibrium again, right? Like, I would say that it's not only giving them a little bit of a push to get out of their comfort zone, but it's actually creating the necessity for them to learn new habits, to establish new patterns.
I suppose it's intentionally putting people back into the storming phase, so taking them from the norming phase, and actually recognizing that sometimes to create a better structure and better environment, you put them back into the storming phase by changing something, and intentionally doing that in a not trying to just throw chaos everywhere, but in a way of being able to put a team back into the storming phase, so they reform and they renormalize into the new ways of working.
It takes, what they say, it's like 30 days to break a habit in theory. So what's that, a couple of sprints on average?
Yeah.
And back in the swing again. So if you're looking at your velocity or whatever else, there's a blip, but it's not going to be life-changing. You can get back on track.
Absolutely. Great story too. Thank you very much for sharing that. Tuesday is Team Day here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. But tomorrow we talk about something that goes beyond the work we do with the teams. We will talk about how to lead change and what our guests have learned from leading and participating in change programs during their career. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.